When I first heard Dixie D'Amelio's new song, Be Happy, I didn't really think that I was going to have much to say about it. On one hand, I was pleasantly surprised, and I was pretty impressed that somebody's very first song that has never done it before came out like that. And of course, we've seen various debut songs that have not exactly turned out like that. So for all intents and purposes, I was like, yeah, okay. Nothing in particular really stood out to me as being musically different other than what you might expect out of a standard pop song. I thought it was a very solid, well-made first song from somebody who has never done it before. But I recently heard it again and I kind of actually gave it a little bit of thought and I said, oh, wait a second, there is something interesting here. And it's not so much in the way that the song was written or the harmonic content or anything like that, but it's more so in the possibilities that are laid out by the way the song is written. So there's really three main sections to this song, and it goes more or less like this. All right, so that we could call that maybe section number one. It's kind of the chorus, it's kind of the main theme, and in between that we have the verse. So you can see throughout those first two sections we have the same chord progression going on, and it's basically just A minor, G to E minor to F, and it climbs back up. Really simple, it works with the melody pretty well, but there's a reason for that. Before we talk about that, we have a third section, and the third section is the only one that differs a little bit. Now, it's not necessarily going to sound like it differs a lot, but it does. And you music theory nerds, before I explain it, let me know in the comments if you know why. The third section goes like this. And then it goes back into the main section, which is used at the beginning of the song and as the chorus. So those are the three main sections. We have one more sort of bridge type of section. It uses the same chords, but the melody changes a little bit. So let's take a look at this melody and talk about some of the things that make this song so usable, in the sense that we can do a lot with this to really kind of make it sound different, maybe more interesting, although interesting is a subjective word, but you know. The point is, this song is extremely flexible, and here's why. Let's take a look at the melody. So in the beginning we have that's the whole first section. What is that? Well, that happens to be the pentatonic scale. Pent being the Latin root for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-note scale. Basically, if we're relating it to the major scale, then the pentatonic scale would be 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 out of the major scale. That's how we build the pentatonic scale. So the pentatonic scale is just a really, really flexible scale, and I'll show you why in a second. But first, let's look at the second section. Still in the pentatonic scale. Same thing. Okay, so far we have not trailed at all away from that scale. Still in it. Still in it. So we so far have not used a single note outside of the C major pentatonic scale. So now, if you caught it, we finally change in that section leading up to the chorus. And that B is the only note so far in the entire song that is not contained within the pentatonic scale. Okay, we've established that this song is like all pentatonic scale. The entire melody pretty much is in the pentatonic scale. Why is that useful? Why do we care? Well, look at what they did with it. So first, their chord progression that they used was A minor to this G major, E minor sort of passing motion to get us to the 4 chord of F. So you can think of this song as really, I mean, it's kind of C major. You could also consider it to be an A minor. I usually just go the more simple route and call it C major. So we start on the minor 6 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, A. So A minor, we start on the minor 6 chord, and we go 5, minor 3, 4. And that's pretty much our chord progression throughout the majority of the song with very, very little variation. If we take that pentatonic scale that's in C major, you'll notice that so far, it hasn't sounded out of place. We can move this chord around, even though we're playing C major pentatonic. We can move those chords around and they all kind of work. There's really no clashing. There's no notes in there that are offensive when we get to a certain chord. They all just slot in without much trouble. It's actually a good practice for improvisation. So if you limit yourself to the C major pentatonic scale, you can actually play around with that and practice improvisation that way. You can kind of, really mess around with that scale with that same chord progression, and all the notes are going to pretty much work throughout the entire thing. So what that means is that this melody is extremely flexible. We could apply it to all kinds of different sounds, right? So we could switch up the order of the chords and kind of see, what might sound different. Well, instead of going, instead of doing that, what if we started maybe on... So we can really use the same exact chords, put them in a different order, and they still sound good, they still work. Okay, well, how could we step maybe away from those basic chords that we're using and introduce some newer, more interesting sounds? Anytime we land on an individual note, what are the possibilities there? And the simple answer is pretty much whatever you want. Now let me show you what I mean. If we take the melody, let's take this G for example, okay? Because this is the first time that the chords in the original change. We go from... Okay, so we go from A minor to G major. All right, what can we use on that G? Really can use anything. G has a function in some variation of a chord in literally every key. Watch this. The case that we use it in the song, it's G major, which it happens to be the 1. Well, G is the major 7th of A flat, okay? It's the minor 7th of A. It's the 6th of B flat. This is a weird one. It's the flat 13 of B, and that would kind of sound like... So you can kind of hear it in context, So that's a strange one. C is easy. It's the 5th, right? What about D flat? Ooh, that's a nice one. It's the sharp 11 of D flat. Let's keep going. It's the natural 11th of D. It's the 3rd of E flat, or the minor 3rd of E. It's the 9th of F. It's the flat 9 of F sharp. So again, this one is a little weird, but in context it would sound like this. So you can kind of hear how it does make sense that way. And that brings us back to G. So what we've just done is we've showed how G can literally apply to some variation of a chord in every single key. It's basically unlimited in how we can use it. The question becomes, where are we coming from and where are we going to? Because that's what we want to make sense of. We want to create chords that are going to lead into one another well. They're going to create interesting harmony. They're going to go somewhere with intention, and they're going to arrive at a place that is satisfying and sensible to our ears. But aside from that, I mean, we kind of can do really whatever we want. You know, I mean, it's a little different, but it's an interesting change. Your ear kind of goes, whoa, what's that, right? And then you can find a way to turn it back around. So that's a pretty simple one. I mean, it maintains a lot of the similar type of sound, just throws in a few interesting things here and there. Now you could go crazy with it, and you could kind of like really change every single note of the melody to match up with some wacky thing that really throws your ear for a loop. That might sound something like this. I don't know why you would do that. It's a little bit convoluted, and while it does sound interesting, it kind of starts, for me, it starts to border that line of like, okay, well, what's actually going on here? What's practical? What's satisfying to listen to? What makes us feel like we're going in a specific direction? All that stuff is super important. So it's not always the best approach to just throw random chords onto all these different notes, even though we can. But it's a good practice to understand how to apply a single note to many, many, many different types of chords. So we kind of have two approaches to this song, where the melody, being almost entirely in that pentatonic scale, gives us the freedom to really change up a lot of chords and have almost no impact on what the song actually sounds like. Therefore, it's a really easy song to practice this concept. So you can do two things with it that would be very, very helpful. You can either take the chord progression that they have and focus on improvising with that pentatonic scale, or we could take the melody, which happens to be mostly in the pentatonic scale, and we can change the chords around it. In ways that almost don't even really sound different than the original. So if you're wondering about reharmonization of songs that you know, or even just trying to figure out how to write perhaps more interesting chords in your own music, these are all things to think about. How can you take a melody that maybe you've come up with and apply different chords to it instead of the ones that might feel a little bit bland to you? How can you take a melody and apply it in a number of different ways to just create so many different sounds, to open up so many different opportunities? So don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try to add some wacky chords to things. Be like, well, if I have this C, how can I apply that C to a chord in F sharp or A or all kinds of different things, and just listen to what these different things sound like. And you can come up with all kinds of really cool ideas, and it might help you to kind of feel unstuck. I know oftentimes I feel stuck in playing the things that I know how to play, or the things that I know work, or the things that are familiar. And it's difficult to kind of break out of that. This is a really good way to try to do that. Just trying different things, trying some wacky harmonies. It can really illustrate a lot, and it can really help open up your ear to different opportunities. So for example, here is, okay, I'm gonna force myself to play a chromatic descending bass line. So every time I move chords, it has to be down by a half step, and I gotta figure out how to make it fit. We'll pick a random starting point. How about D? It doesn't end up on F in the same place that the song does, but that is ridiculous. But it's a good example of, so you can brute force a lot of things into working theoretically that you maybe don't want to do in actual application, but are fun to mess around with as an educational tool. Definitely play around with this stuff. It is super fun. You can come up with a lot of interesting sounds, and it can really help you in terms of your own songwriting. Figure out, okay, how can I make my music more interesting? Start by making other people's music more interesting, because you're able to hear other people's music a little bit more from kind of like an objective listener standpoint, as opposed to your own music, which you've decided on what that sound is in your head. It's very difficult to hear our own music differently than we've already come up with it. But somebody else's song, I could sit here and listen to Dixie D'Amelio and be like, oh, I'll change it this way, I'll change it that way, I'll change it, because I have no attachment to how the song was written. So try this out. This is a really, really cool tool to use. It's really a lot of fun, and it can definitely teach you a lot. So anyways, that's gonna do it for me today. Be sure to check out the merch store. There's a link in the description. I so appreciate the support of everybody that's bought merch so far. It means a ton, so thank you for that. And thank you for watching this video. Leave a comment, let me know what you'd like me to take a look at next, and we will see you in the next video.